Hi, how you doing? Welcome back to another video on the channel. Just before we get started, any support on the channel, likes and subscribes greatly appreciated. And what we've got today is a wildcard video for Game Week 10. We've still got Leicester City and Nottingham Forest to play, but pretty much Game Week 9 is all done and dusted. And what we've got is some teams to target for Game Week 10 going forward. So I'm going to start with Bournemouth. And it's important to remember that all the fixtures on the screen now it actually takes us up to the international break, the World Cup. So this is the run of fixtures you might need to target because you get another wild card as the world over the course of the World Cup. And Bournemouth, they're looking pretty solid. I believe they're unbeaten under Gary O'Neill, the caretaker manager. And initially, they've got, 5 out of the 7 fixtures remaining. They look pretty decent, and it's interesting to see how West Ham are gonna turn out now. They may be getting a bit of run of form, but whether they can keep that going consistently, I think, Bournemouth, a few cheap filler players, enablers that you might wanna get in to help you get other players in your team. I don't think they should be overlooked. Next team we've got is Chelsea. Now, they've got a bit of a scrappy winner against Crystal Palace late on. But really, that new manager bounce, that last minute winner is the sort of edge they're going to get with this new manager going forward. Two great fixtures initially. Brentford are maybe going off the boil a little bit. And then, at the point that they play Man United, they could have 4 wins on the bounce. So I really think, someone like Fafana, maybe even Reece James, the teams they're playing aren't scoring loads of goals, but I think they're definitely worth a look. Next up, we've got Crystal Palace, and although they're not doing very well in the league, they're still not conceding many goals. The teams that they're about to play aren't going to score many goals either. You've got Leeds, Leicester, Wolves, Everton, Southampton. I think all of those teams, you could even include Forest in there later on, are struggling to score goals. So I think a Crystal Palace defender, maybe even an attacker, if you fancy the chances against those defences, should be considered when you're picking your wildcard team. Now, next up, we've got Man City. I know there's a blank in there, and there's Liverpool, but for me, Liverpool at the moment are zero threat, really, especially if you've got a Man City attacker in your team or a midfielder. I don't really see the need to worry about the blank or Liverpool here. I think you could quite easily rotate for that blank game week and just sit them for that week and not really lose out because everyone owns someone like Haaland. So I think that is still worth putting them in. I don't really see a need to worry about them. Even the rotation risk, they're proving to not really, make a difference now. They're all playing no matter what. The final team to target is West Ham. Got a great 2-0 victory against Wolves this week. And I do think that they are a great team. On their day, they're a top 6 team. I think someone like Bowen is a great option. I also think having a West Ham defender shouldn't be overlooked. I think Fulham, Southampton, especially if Mitrovic is injured now, they're great games for a West Ham defender to play in. You can maybe rotate them against Liverpool, and then the rest of those fixtures shouldn't really be a concern either. Teams to avoid, and we're going to start with Man United. Now they conceded 6 to Man City today, and some people might say, well, loads of teams are going to concede 6 to Man City. And I know they scored 3, but 2 of those were late on when they were already 6-1 down and the game is over, and one was a penalty. So I really would stay away from Man United. They're a bit hot and cold at the moment, and those fixtures in the middle of that bracket there are not looking great with Newcastle, Spurs, and Chelsea. I would really be tempted just to leave them out and not have to worry about them, especially on the defensive end. Next up, we've got Liverpool, and like I said on the teams to target, I would just stay away from Liverpool right about now. Even someone like Salah, I know he got the assist this weekend, but they're just out of sorts. They're not really worked it out. You would think having a break in the league, I think they hadn't really played in 31 days in the league, I think. And you would think that break just to get them together and work things out would have an impact, but they already found themselves 2-0 down against Brighton, which just goes to show that the preparation, the concentration just isn't there right now. I think defensively, they've got a lot of premium defenders, and I would just spread the money elsewhere or invest it in some other premium attackers from Man City. I don't really see the need to get Liverpool in at all at the moment, and Salah is only 36% owned, I think. There's really no need to worry about missing out there because even if he does start returning, it's not going to have as big an impact as say if someone like Haaland was returning and you had Salah instead of Haaland. Next up, we've got Southampton. Pretty dreadful run of form, to be honest, and even lost at home to Everton this weekend. Next up is Man City away, as well as Liverpool, Newcastle, and Arsenal in the next 7. I don't really see a need to get Southampton in. There are better, cheaper options, and their best options, their more expensive options, they're just not firing at the moment, so there's no need to get involved in them. Fourth, we've got Wolves, I think Chelsea next, and then a reasonable run of fixtures. Although with teams like Leicester in 3 4 weeks, Brighton and Arsenal, you don't really know how they're going to turn out. They're just not scoring, and there's definite unrest in the Wolves camp. I think the manager is really under fire, and I would put him as next to go in the sack race as well. So maybe if they have a quick change of manager in the next week or so, you might start considering Wolves players again, with that new manager bounce we spoke about when looking at Chelsea players. So at the moment, I would stay away. There's absolutely no need to even go near Wolves. But something to monitor going forward if there is that manager change. And finally, we've got Brentford. Now, I do still like Ivan Toney, but in the past we've looked at players like Jensen, at Rico Henry, at Rare in goal. And to me, Brentford are just a bit too inconsistent at the moment. And I think when teams are inconsistent, you can still target their attackers because they're probably always going to score goals. But defensively, I think that inconsistency is where it really comes under scrutiny. And, you either keep a clean sheet or you don't really. And I think Newcastle, Chelsea, and Man City. Okay, you could say there's some teams there that aren't really scoring, but then that depends on whether which Brentford are going to turn up. Moving on to the team now, and we're just going to start with the goalkeeper, and we've got Gaeta for Leeds. Still sorry, he's playing Leeds. Still only 4.5 million. Like we said, Crystal Palace a good defensive team to target, and I think he is a fantastic goalkeeper to get in. They rarely concede a lot. They usually lose out in games. If they lose games by a goal, never really get battered, concede relatively long distance shots, which means more save points and potential bonus points for Gaeta there. Moving into the defence, and we start with Kere from West Ham. Now, he's only 4.5 million as well, and recently we've had Soufal from West Ham in our wildcard teams, but Kere played at the weekend um, and did well, to be honest. I think Soufal didn't play at all, and West Ham just have good defensive fixtures moving forward, and I think having a 4.5 million player in there is definitely worth a shout. The upside is massive. Next, we've got Trippier. Fortunate this weekend to get a clean sheet. He got subbed off just before Newcastle conceded to Fulham. I actually had him in my team, didn't know he'd been subbed off, so I was quite fuming at the time because I thought he'd lost his clean sheet points when they conceded after being 4-0 up away to 10-man Fulham. But he is that constant threat for Newcastle and that talisman, really. I think when you think of Newcastle at the moment, he is one of the first players you think of. And rounding out the defence, we've got Reece James. We said earlier, Chelsea have that potential bounce here, and Reece James is one of those explosive players that is has that potential to get a goal and assist in any game. If Chelsea start keeping those clean sheets, that is pretty good as well. I did think about putting Mendy in goal. He's 4.9 million, so the budget didn't quite fit it for this team. But I think if you had Mendy in goal coming off that injury, I still think he is someone that you could consider at 4.9 million for a top four team, essentially to start in goal is great value as well. In the midfield, we've got Bowen. Got a goal and assist this weekend. He's been in our wildcard teams for the last couple of weeks, and it did pay off this weekend if you got him in. Someone that's proven in recent seasons to be a goal threat and a massive assist threat. I think this could potentially be the spark plug to really set Bowen off, especially with a good run of games going forward. Almiron was able to get a couple of goals for Newcastle. Whether he's going to be consistent or not is wait to be seen. And this is someone that you could definitely switch out for someone else around that 5.5 million bracket of a midfielder. You might even want to drop him down to a 4.5 million midfielder and use those funds to upgrade someone elsewhere. Maybe you could upgrade Gaeta to Mendy, like we spoke about. But really, I think he is someone that is quite streaky. So I think if he scored in his last game, he is someone that maybe will use that momentum in the next game, especially with the fixture that he's got moving forwards. Next, we've got Sterling. Wolves at home. I think Chelsea could potentially have that explosive start now and go on a really good run of form. I could easily see them winning the next four. I think Sterling is that premium attacker. There, he's not quite De Bruyne, he's not quite Salah or Son, but he is someone that's low owned and with a high potential point scoring rate as well. someone that is going to play for Chelsea. He's not got that rotation risk anymore like he had at City, and he's definitely worth a look if you're looking for that differential option. Rounding out the midfield, we've got Foden, just coming off a hat trick. I believe he scored in the game before as well. And, you know, historically, I've wanted to stay away from Man City players just for that fear of rotation. But to be honest, I think with the World Cup coming up, I think they can just play the players they want to play. Some of them will have a rest over the World Cup, or they'll at least assess once they come back. But for now, I think you just ride that Man City wave. They're clearly the best team in the league, so I don't see why you would hesitate to double them up in somewhere along the pitch. Now, the attack is where we've gone really big here, starting with Kane. I believe he became the first player to score 100 goals away from home in the Premier League history this weekend, so congratulations to that. And I do think he is Spurs' most consistent player. I think, you've got Son that can maybe obviously go off for a hat trick. Kulusevski and Richarlison who might have special moments, but Kane this season has proven that he is that consistent goal threat, and he is scoring more often than not. For a premium asset, whether you want more than one goal a game, that's up to you. But I do think he is worth getting in. Spurs have an okay run moving forwards, and he is that player that is also on penalties you could get in. Next, we've got Haaland. I just don't see why you wouldn't have Haaland in at this point. We're going to talk about missing out on points in a second, but for me, it's the fear of being like overtaken by so many people if you don't own Haaland, that downside. It's not even the upside. If you own him and he blanks, it's not really that a problem. It's if you don't own him and he scores 3 goals and 2 assists, which is going to see you move 2 million places down the ranks over a weekend. So you really just need to get him in. And rounding out the attack, we've got Ivan Toney. Now, we did talk about Brentford being a team to avoid, but we did also mention that as an attacking point of view, inconsistent teams can still score goals. If Brentford score, you would expect Tony to be involved, and they do have an okay run. They're playing a lot of mid-table teams that you don't really know what you're going to get from them. So it's really up to Brentford as to whether they can establish that consistency. And on the bench, we've got lots of cheap options here, but the main talking point is for Fafana. I really like the Chelsea double up, especially in defence. I think if you're not going to get Mendy, I think Fafana is an absolute must at 4.4 million still, I think. And those fixtures, he is guaranteed to play. They've just brought him in for such an expensive price. And I don't see why you wouldn't have him in, especially on a wild card. I could maybe understand why you wouldn't waste a transfer on him right about now. But if you're wild carding and you've got Chelsea starting defender at 4.4 million, I don't see why you wouldn't get him in, especially when you've got other players like Kehrer from West Ham and Williams from Nottingham Forest around that 4.5 million mark. I think Fafana offers a lot more value than they do. So a few tips just to finish on, and the first one is don't worry about missed points. So me personally, I didn't have Haaland in my team. I haven't all year. I did talk in my very first videos that you should get him in. I didn't listen to my own advice. Um, and what I am thinking about getting him in for this game week coming up. And my point is that don't worry if players have already scored points and you've not had them in. I think if a player has scored well, or you think they're going to score well in the next game week, that's what you want to look out for. Obviously, if I'd had Haaland in from the start of the season and captained him, I probably would have had about 200 more points than I would have right now, give or take. But you can't really think on that because yeah, you've missed out on points now, but if you continue not to get in players that you want for that reason, then you're just going to continue missing out on points. So really, it's would you want to miss out on 9 game weeks worth of points, or 8 game weeks worth of points, or 38 game weeks worth of points because you were too stubborn to get in the player that you knew you should have got in at the time. So I do think someone like Haaland is a perfect example because there are people out there that won't own him and are thinking, he's scored all these points. What's the point? I might as well try and continue without him. Sometimes you've just got to cut your losses, and that is a skill to sort of know when you're beaten and to join the party. And I think you definitely need to be joining the Haaland party right about now. Another thing is to look out for the international break coming up in game week 16. And I think you need to just target teams up to that point and then reassess during that wild card over the World Cup. So, yeah, thank you very much for listening. Let me know what you think about the wildcard team. Any support on the channel is greatly appreciated. Hopefully, you had a good game week. Hopefully, this team helps you out as well. But let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next one.